Alexander Whitmore had everything a man could dream of: wealth, power, and success. From a young age, he worked hard to build his business empire. He started with nothing, but through determination, he became one of the richest men in the country. People admired him, envied him, and wanted to be like him. But behind the shining world of luxury, something was missing. His wife, Emily, once meant everything to him. They had fallen in love when he was just a struggling businessman. Back then, he promised her a life filled with happiness. But as his business grew, so did his distance from Emily. Work consumed him. Long meetings, business trips, and endless calls left little time for his wife. Emily tried to be patient. She understood his ambitions, but she also wanted a husband, not just a man who sent expensive gifts in place of love. At first, she waited for things to change. She told herself he would slow down one day. But the truth was, Alexander never stopped. One evening, Emily finally broke down. She had prepared a special dinner, hoping to spend time with her husband. But Alexander arrived late, barely paying attention to the meal she had carefully cooked. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, responding to emails. Emily couldn't hold back her frustration anymore. "Alex, is this what our marriage has become?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "You don't even see me anymore," she said. "We live in the same house, but it feels like we're strangers." Alexander sighed. He didn't like arguments. "Emily, I work hard for us. For you. Everything I do is to give us a better future." "But what future, Alex?" she said, tears in her eyes. "A future where I am alone in a big house while my husband only cares about business." The room fell silent. Alexander knew she was right, but he didn't know how to change. In his mind, success meant giving his wife the best life. He didn't realize that what she truly wanted was him, not just his money. After a long pause, Emily spoke again. "If you can't give me time, then maybe it's better if you go." Her words hit him hard. He never thought she would say something like that. But instead of fighting for their marriage, instead of apologizing, Alexander did what he always did. He avoided emotions. He stood up, took his coat, and walked out. That night, Alexander left Emily behind, believing it was the right choice. He convinced himself that she would be happier without him. He never looked back. He had no idea that in just a few weeks, Emily's life would change forever. And so would his. The night Alexander left, Emily sat alone in their big empty house. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but deep inside, she knew she had made the right choice. She had loved Alexander with all her heart, but love wasn't enough when she felt invisible in her own marriage. Days turned into weeks, and Emily started rebuilding her life. She moved out of their luxurious mansion and found a small but cozy apartment in a quieter part of the city. She didn't want anything from Alexander. Not his money, not his help. She wanted to stand on her own feet. But just as she started to feel free, life threw her a surprise she never expected. One morning, she woke up feeling sick. At first, she thought it was just stress, but as days passed, the nausea didn't stop. A strange thought crossed her mind, but she pushed it away. It wasn't possible, was it? Finally, she went to the doctor. Sitting in the clinic, her heart pounded as she waited for the test results. When the doctor walked in, smiling, Emily's whole world changed. "Congratulations, Emily," the doctor said. "You're pregnant." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She placed a hand on her stomach, as if trying to feel the tiny life growing inside her. A wave of emotions washed over her: shock, happiness, fear. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, but not like this, not alone. But the surprises didn't stop there. A few weeks later, during her ultrasound appointment, the nurse's eyes widened as she examined the screen. "Oh my," the nurse whispered, turning the monitor toward Emily. "What is it?" Emily asked, worried. The nurse smiled. "You're not having just one baby. You're having 4 quadruplets. Emily's heart skipped a beat. 4 babies. She could barely believe it. The room spun for a moment as she tried to process what this meant. Raising one child alone was already a challenge. How would she take care of 4? But after the initial shock, something strong awakened inside her. She wasn't just a woman abandoned by her husband. She was a mother now, and she would do whatever it took to give her babies a good life. From that moment on, Emily worked harder than ever. She took extra jobs, saved every penny, and prepared for the arrival of her children. The road ahead was tough, but she refused to give up. Meanwhile, Alexander continued his life, completely unaware of the secret Emily carried. He traveled the world, made new business deals, and never once looked back. He thought his past was behind him, but fate had other plans. Years later, he would return, only to face a truth that would change everything. Emily's life changed in ways she never imagined. When she first found out she was having quadruplets, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The journey ahead was going to be difficult, but Emily was determined to make it work. She set up a small nursery in her apartment, carefully decorating it with soft colors and stuffed animals. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Emily knew she couldn't give her children the lavish life they might have had with Alexander, but she could give them something far more important: love. The pregnancy was hard. Her body wasn't used to carrying 4 babies, and she was often exhausted. There were days when she could barely get out of bed, but the thought of her children kept her going. She couldn't give up now. When the day finally came, Emily went into labor. It was a long, painful process, but after hours of waiting, she held 4 tiny, perfect babies in her arms. 2 boys and 2 girls, each one unique, with their own little features. Emily couldn't stop smiling. She had done it. She had brought them into the world. But as much as she was filled with love and pride, there was no denying how hard things were. Raising quadruplets was no small task. She had to wake up every few hours to feed them, change their diapers, and comfort them when they cried. There were moments when she felt completely overwhelmed, and she would sit in the middle of the nursery, holding her babies, unsure how she would make it through. Money was tight. Emily had saved as much as she could, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. She couldn't afford daycare, so she took on multiple jobs. Some days, she worked at a cafe in the morning, then spent the afternoon cleaning houses. In the evenings, she would pick up odd jobs, all while making sure her babies were taken care of. It was exhausting. She had little time for herself, and sleep was a rare luxury. But Emily kept pushing forward. She couldn't afford to fail her children. They deserved more than she ever had growing up. The hardest part was watching the world around her move on, while she stayed stuck in the routine of caring for her babies. She would watch couples in the park, holding hands and laughing, while she struggled to keep her children calm. Still, Emily was strong. Her love for her children gave her the strength to keep going. Every time she saw their little faces, she remembered why she was doing this. For them. Meanwhile, Alexander continued with his life, completely unaware of the family he had left behind. He traveled the world, growing his business and enjoying his success. He didn't know that in a small apartment, 4 children were growing up, each one with his own eyes and smile. But fate has a way of bringing people back together when they least expect it. Years passed since Alexander left, and life moved on. He had become even more successful, expanding his business to new countries. His name was known everywhere, and his wealth seemed to grow by the day. But as his empire grew, something else began to feel empty: his personal life. Despite all the luxury and fame, Alexander often found himself alone. He had briefly dated a few women, but none of them seemed to matter. There was always a part of him that missed something, or rather someone. The thoughts about Emily, the woman he had once loved, began creeping back into his mind. He had tried to bury those thoughts, but now he couldn't ignore them anymore. One night, Alexander found himself sitting alone in his office, staring out at the city skyline. He thought about the years he had spent without her and the family they could have had. But it was too late now. Emily had moved on. He had chosen his business over her, and he had paid the price for it. But then, an old friend reached out to him. A charity event was coming up, one that would be hosted in their hometown. The friend insisted that Alexander attend, even though Alexander wasn't one to enjoy such events. It was all about networking and business deals. Still, something inside him stirred. Perhaps it was time to go back to his roots and see what had become of the people he had once known. The night of the event, Alexander entered the grand hall, greeted by familiar faces. But as he made his way through the crowd, something unexpected happened. He saw her. Across the room, standing near a group of people, was Emily. She looked different, more confident, more radiant, but it was unmistakably her. His heart skipped a beat as he watched her. Time had passed, but seeing her again brought back a flood of memories. But what caught his attention the most wasn't just Emily. It was the children she was standing with. 4 children. They were laughing and playing together, each one looking like a mirror image of Emily. They had her eyes, her smile, but something was strange. They looked familiar. For a moment, Alexander's mind raced. Could it be? The thought seemed impossible. Emily had never told him anything about children. She had never mentioned that she was pregnant when he left. Was it possible that these children were his? Confused and anxious, Alexander stepped closer, trying to get a better look. His heart pounded as he realized the truth. These children were his. But how could this be? How could he have missed out on so many years with his own children? He didn't know whether to feel angry, hurt, or excited. All he knew was that he had to talk to Emily. He couldn't just walk away this time. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had happened all those years ago, and why Emily had never told him. Alexander's heart raced as he walked toward Emily. He tried to steady his breath, but there was a growing sense of panic inside him. The 4 children were standing next to her, laughing and playing together, just as if they belonged there. He couldn't stop staring at them. The resemblance was too clear to ignore. Their eyes, their smiles, they were his. Emily caught sight of him before he could reach her, her expression immediately turning cold. She had always been a strong woman, but seeing him again stirred emotions she had tried to bury for years. She hadn't expected this. Not here. Not now. Alexander, Emily said, her voice quiet but firm. He stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. There was so much he wanted to ask, but the words were stuck in his throat. Instead, he blurted out the question that had been on his mind since he first spotted the children. Are they mine? His voice trembled slightly. Emily's eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had kept this secret for so long, thinking it was the best decision at the time. She had never planned on telling him. She had moved on with her life, and now, facing him again, she wasn't sure if it was a good idea to reopen the past. Yes, she finally said, her voice steady, but filled with a hint of sadness. They are yours. The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the chest. His mind raced as he tried to process the fact that these children, whom he had never known, were his. 4 children, his children. How had he missed out on all these years with them? Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice now filled with confusion and hurt. Emily looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. The memories of their past, the pain of his departure, flooded back. She had felt alone during the pregnancy, and even after the children were born. She hadn't wanted to reach out to him. She had convinced herself that Alexander wouldn't want to be a part of their lives. He had made it clear that business mattered more than family. I didn't think you'd care, she said softly. You left without a word, without looking back. I didn't want to put my hopes up, only to be disappointed again. Alexander's heart sank. He had never realized how much his decision to leave had affected her. He had been so focused on his work, his career, that he had failed to see the pain he caused. I should have been there, he said, his voice filled with regret. "I was wrong to walk away." The children, sensing the tension in the air, stopped playing and looked at Alexander with curious eyes. They had no idea who he was, but something about him felt familiar. Emily noticed their confusion and stepped forward, gently taking one of the children's hands. "These are your children, Alexander," she said softly. "The boys are Ethan and Liam, and the girls are Ava and Lily." For the first time in years, Alexander felt a spark of hope. There was a chance to make things right, to be a father to them. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily had every right to be upset with him, and he couldn't expect her to forgive him just like that. "I want to be part of their lives," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I've made mistakes, but I want to make up for them." Emily looked at him, unsure of what to say. Could she trust him again? Could she let him back into their lives after everything that had happened? The days following Alexander's discovery were filled with uncertainty. He had never expected to be standing in front of his children, facing the reality of what he had missed. The hurt in Emily's eyes made him feel like an intruder in their lives. He couldn't just walk back in and pretend everything was fine. He had to earn their trust, and it would take time. The first few attempts to talk to the children were awkward. Alexander tried to engage with them, but they were hesitant. Ethan, the oldest of the boys, stared at him with wide eyes, his arms crossed over his chest. Liam, the younger boy, was more curious, but still kept his distance. Ava and Lily, the girls, were shy, occasionally glancing at him before looking away. Emily watched from a distance, not sure what to make of Alexander's sudden interest in their lives. She had spent so many years protecting her children from the pain of the past, and now here was Alexander, trying to make up for lost time. She wanted to believe he had changed, but the doubt lingered in her mind. Would he stay, or would he leave again once things got difficult? "I'm sorry," Alexander said one afternoon, sitting down beside Emily on the park bench, where they had once spent time together as a couple. "I know I've made a mess of things, and I can't change the past. But I want to be a father to them. I want to be part of their lives. I understand if you're angry, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that I'm different now." Emily sighed, looking out at the children as they played nearby. They were laughing, running around with a carefree joy that she hadn't seen in years. They had no idea how much their world was about to change. "I don't know, Alex," she said, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "It's been so long. They've grown up without you. They don't even know who you are." "I know," he said, his voice filled with regret. "And I know I can't just walk in and expect everything to be perfect. But I can try. I'll do whatever it takes." Emily looked at him, studying his face for any sign of insincerity. She found none. There was something in his eyes, something she hadn't seen in years. The man standing in front of her wasn't the same one who had left her behind. This version of Alexander was determined, and there was a quiet hope in his voice that made her hesitate. The next few weeks were filled with small steps. Alexander started visiting more regularly, bringing small gifts for the children, books, toys, anything to show that he was thinking of them. He would spend time with them, helping with homework, playing games, and just getting to know who they were. It wasn't easy. The children were still unsure, and Emily had to remind herself that she couldn't rush their feelings. They were learning to trust him, just as he was learning to be a father. One evening, after a family dinner that Alexander had helped prepare, Liam shyly approached him. "Dad," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can we play basketball tomorrow?" Alexander's heart swelled with emotion. "Of course, Liam. I'd love to." It was a small moment, but it meant the world to him. Slowly, he was finding his place in their lives. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Emily watched this exchange from across the room, her heart torn between hope and caution. Could she really trust him again? Could she open her heart to the man who had walked away so easily? As the days passed, Emily started to see the changes in Alexander. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. and for the first time in years, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to be a family again. Weeks passed, and Alexander's presence in the children's lives grew stronger. Each day, he made an effort to show them that he was there to stay. His attempts to connect with them, though small, didn't go unnoticed. Ethan, the oldest, was still skeptical. He kept his distance and watched from the sidelines as Alexander slowly integrated himself into their routines. But Liam, the younger boy, had warmed up to him much faster. They spent afternoons shooting hoops in the backyard, their laughter echoing in the air as they worked on their shots. Liam was the first to call him Dad, and that small word meant everything to Alexander. It was a sign that, despite the years apart, a bond was beginning to form between them. Ava and Lily, the two girls, were more reserved. They would occasionally give Alexander shy smiles, but they weren't quite ready to open up. He understood that their trust had to be earned, and he was willing to wait. Emily watched it all from a distance. At first, she had been cautious, not sure if Alexander was truly committed to being a father. But with each passing day, she saw the effort he was putting in. She could see the change in him. He was no longer the man who had abandoned her, the man who thought work was more important than family. This Alexander was different. One afternoon, Emily and Alexander sat in the living room, watching the children play outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the room. "I've missed so much," Alexander said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "I've missed their first steps, their first words, their laughter. I've missed seeing them grow." Emily turned to look at him, her eyes softening. "It's not easy, Alex. You can't just pick up where you left off. But I see you trying, and that means something." Alexander nodded, his gaze focused on the children outside. "I'll do whatever it takes. I want to be there for them. I want them to know that I'm here, that I'm not going anywhere this time." Emily sighed, a mix of hope and caution in her eyes. "I want that for them, too. But it's not just about being there for them, Alex. It's about showing them that they matter to you every single day. It's about more than just playing games and bringing gifts. It's about being there when they need you, through the hard times too." Alexander knew she was right. Being a father wasn't just about the good moments. It was about being there during the tough times, supporting them when life didn't go as planned. He had learned it the hard way. That evening after dinner, Alexander sat with the children as they did their homework. He helped Ethan with a math problem, listened to Liam's excited stories about school, and read a bedtime story to Ava and Lily. He found joy in the simple things he had missed out on for so long. The next day, Alexander made a promise to himself. He would be there for them, no matter what. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. As Emily watched him interact with the kids, a part of her began to believe in the possibility of a new beginning. Maybe, just maybe, they could build the family they had once dreamed of. The days seemed to fly by, and with each passing one, Alexander grew closer to the children. It wasn't always easy, but he was determined. His patience paid off as Ethan, Liam, Ava, and Lily slowly began to trust him more. They laughed with him, played with him, and even shared their thoughts and dreams. It was everything Alexander had longed for, the connection he had missed out on for so many years. But there was still one hurdle left to cross: Emily. She had watched Alexander's transformation from a distance, but the question remained: could she trust him again? Could she open her heart to the man who had left her and the children all those years ago? She had seen the changes, and she had felt the shifts in the way he interacted with their family. But after everything, she was still hesitant. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Emily and Alexander sat on the porch. The air was cool, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. It was the kind of peaceful night that made it easy to forget the years of heartache. "Alex," Emily said softly, breaking the silence, "I see the changes in you. I see the effort. But She paused, choosing her words carefully. You can't expect me to just forgive and forget everything that happened. It's been so long, and we've both moved on in so many ways. I've had to be strong for the kids. I've had to create a life for us, one that didn't include you. I know, Alexander replied, his voice filled with regret. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even expect you to love me again. But I want to be a part of their lives, Emily. I want to be a part of yours too. I understand if it takes time, but I'm not going anywhere. Emily looked at him, her heart torn between old wounds and new hope. She had seen how much he had changed. She had seen how he had worked so hard to earn the trust of their children. But could she ever really let him back into her life? The thought of opening her heart again scared her. What if history repeated itself? What if he left again? I'm scared, Alex, she confessed, her voice trembling. I'm scared that if I let you back in, you'll just leave again. And I can't go through that again. I won't let the kids go through it again. Alexander reached out, gently taking her hand. I promise, Emily, I won't leave. I've learned the hard way that family is everything. I've spent too much time chasing things that don't matter, and I regret every second I wasn't here with you and the kids, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in years, Emily believed him. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, and she felt the love in his words. Slowly, she let go of the fear and doubt that had held her back. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. They had a chance. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of laughter. She went to the kitchen to find Alexander making breakfast with the children, their voices filled with joy. She smiled to herself, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, they could build the family they had always dreamed of. Months passed, and life began to feel more balanced for Emily and her children. Things weren't perfect, but they were better than they had been in years. Alexander was no longer a stranger in their home. He was a steady presence, a father to his children, and a partner to Emily. The kids had started to trust him, each in their own way. Ethan, though still cautious, had begun to confide in him about school and his dreams. Liam had taken to Alexander like a second father, always asking to play basketball or spend time together. Ava and Lily, the younger girls, would often crawl into his lap, asking for stories at bedtime, a simple sign of affection that warmed Alexander's heart. For Emily, the change in Alexander was undeniable. She had never imagined that the man who once walked away from her and their family would come back and become the person he was now. She had watched him transform into someone who truly valued family over everything else. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the sound of laughter filled the air. Alexander had made their favorite dish, and the kids were chatting away, each one sharing stories from their day. Emily looked around the table, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the food or the laughter, it was the feeling of being whole again. After dinner, Alexander stood up, his eyes meeting Emily's. He smiled, his heart full. I know I've said it before, he began, his voice soft but firm. But I want to say it again. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to be a part of your lives. I don't deserve it, but I promise I will never take it for granted. Emily smiled back at him, her eyes reflecting the love and trust she had rediscovered. You're here now, Alex. That's all that matters. And for the first time in years, Emily believed that their family was whole again. They had faced so much pain, so many obstacles, but they had come through stronger than before. The road had been long, and there had been moments when they weren't sure if they could make it. But they had. As the night went on, Alexander gathered the children together, excitedly planning a family trip to the beach. They had never gone on vacation as a family before. Emily smiled, watching them talk excitedly about what they would do when they got there. It felt like the start of something new. In the days that followed, the family's bond grew stronger. Alexander continued to prove himself to Emily and the children, not through grand gestures, but through his consistency. He was there for the kids when they needed help with school, when they wanted to talk about their day, and when they just needed someone to listen. Emily couldn't help but feel grateful for the second chance they had been given. She had never expected this, never imagined that, after all the heartache, their family could come back together. But here they were, stronger and more united than ever. As Alexander looked at the smiling faces around him, he knew that this was where he belonged. This was his family, and he would do everything in his power to never lose them again.